Welcome back to Palatable Politics, a show where we take the complexity out of politics and make it palatable for you. With me, your host, TJ Maslela. Welcome to the show. In today's session, we're going to be discussing political journalism. And here to give us insight is none other than Mrs. Hajra Omarjee, who has been a political journalist for almost 20 years.
Well, not that old yet.
But she isn't as young as her. She's not as old, not as young as she looks, right?
She's not as young as... Oh, thank you.
Yes,
I appreciate
yes,
that.
Okay.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Let's start with a bit of who you are and how you got to where you are now. Can you just give us a bit of your journey?
So I didn't have an easy childhood. My mum died when I was quite young. Had foster parents. Didn't have the best education. What I did have is affirmative action and employment equity. So, and a Snooki Zigalala at the SABC.
Okay, I didn't know it was there.
Snooki Zigalala was the SABC head of news under former President Thabo Mbeki. And he, like the administration then, was incredibly serious about transformation. I entered the workplace around 2000, in the early 2000s, where employment equity and EE targets were, AA and EE targets were taken very seriously. The private sector and SOEs tried to comply as much as they could. I'm a product of that generation. Julisizwe Simelane, Mahlatsi Gallons, and many others are products of that generation where even though we didn't have a good education or the best start in life, we got that first job over someone who was better qualified than us. And then we just worked extremely hard to get to where we are today.
Why politics and why political journalism out of everything?
So they say kids that grow up without parents kind of look for a home. So you find that at church, in sports, or in politics. And I think politics is where I found it. Now,
in reporting of politics and journalism, the objectiveness of the reporting. We've seen what can be deemed as selective reporting. Can you walk us through it? How do we achieve it?
So I think everyone does have a natural bias. A natural bias because the Constitution allows us to vote correctly. A natural bias because of where we come from, our circumstances and our experiences in life, then force us to see things differently. Speak to some people more comfortably, others more uncomfortably. What I think is important is to continuously try to speak to everyone and use what you hear in order to shape your perspective. To never shy away from asking the hard questions, even to those you consider to be your friends. Because I have found that in asking my friends hard questions, they have been willing to answer, so long as my motivation is not to try to undermine them, but to try to understand what the hell's going on. But I always say to people, South Africans are judges too. And I've always thought that, when waiting for judgments that could change the body politic dramatically, South Africans are judges too. Journalists are South African too. And what I think is important for judges, for journalists, for any professional, for doctors, whatever, is to live within your salary, to live within your means, so that your integrity is not compromised. So you don't need anything from anyone. I'm not looking for a tender. I'm having a genuine engagement with you because I want to have this conversation. And I feel that what you tell me needs to be added or lead the national conversation. That's the only reason I'm sitting down with you or I talk to anyone else.
So understand the bias. That's fine. That's natural. But now, does it not get a bit too far when you have journalists who one day are reporting and the next day they're a PR counselor like Edwin, There'll be a number we've seen.
Edwin Msimi, who went to Action SA. There's Gareth van Onselen, who went to the DA. There's people who have gone to the ANC.
Where's the line?
There's people who've gone to the ANC, the DA. So are you saying if I went to the ANC or the DA or whichever other party tomorrow and said, "Hi, I'm Hajra. I have 20 years experience doing this job. I think I can help you push your agenda," would the party not say yes?
They definitely would. However,
the problem is that everyone wants to be politicians in South Africa, because when you become a politician or you join a political party, you drive a nice car, your kids go to a good school, and also we've seen politicians living a very high life. You know, most people, even professionals who have done very well, don't drink, Glenfiddich 18-year-old or Johnny Walker. Well, I don't know anyone who drinks Johnny Walker Green anymore.
And you know a lot of...
Yeah. So, like, people are drinking 4,500, 5,000, 1,600 for a bottle of champagne. Most South Africans, even very successful politicians, cannot afford that. So the life we are living and the life we are projecting is forcing people to go into politics for the wrong reasons, firstly. Secondly, there's still a massive pay gap in the industry. The media industry hasn't grown, it has shrunk. I think there was a study I was reading a couple of months ago that said where there were 10,000 journalists in newsrooms a few years ago, before COVID, there are 4,500 journalists in newsrooms today. Which means newsrooms are shrinking because the economy is bad. When we had a 5% economic growth rate, the industry was growing. The economy has been shrinking for about 10 years now. So people go into politics because they're looking for a livelihood. What they don't, unfortunately, know is that it's a 24/7 job, and most political parties are NGOs that are not well funded.
Yeah, no. The finances around political parties is one that I think is also...
But it looks good from the outside because political leaders are drinking those expensive bottles, wearing expensive clothes, driving expensive cars, and they're setting a poor example. Sorry.
Yeah, so... sometimes the reporting and the coverage is sometimes tends towards the covering of the lifestyle. How does one move that towards raising consciousness about politics, the issues, current affairs, and just bringing people up to date, youth in particular? Absolutely.
It's not my place to judge where you got that car from or where you got that handbag from. That's your personal business, and there's no reason for me to suspect anything unless there's something in the public domain that we know about. It's important that we try to remember the media's role in a constitutional democracy, right? Okay. And for a long time, because of state capture, we yielded that power to a politician, a faction, a party, and it's important for us to take that power back and to remember what our role is. Our role is to build this country, to build this democracy, to have conversations that matter. And I think while social media has been a fantastic place to democratize the media space, it has also meant that experience, ethics, integrity has fallen by the wayside. It's easy for me to pick on a politician's weight. It's easy for me to ask a politician, where did you get that handbag from? I've heard stories of journalists asking politicians for money. It's easy to do that because you are in that social media space that is prioritizing the wrong things. And I think we're not an arm of state. We consider ourselves a fourth pillar, but we're not really a fourth pillar. We need to have conversations about transformation in the industry. And until I think we need to better define our role in a constitutional democracy. I know I haven't answered your question, but I try my best to keep it to the national interest and the national conversation and not worry too much about the rest of it.
You highlighted transformation. How is that been going into the newsrooms? Is there any?
Okay, we'll get to the newsrooms.
Okay.
Okay, let's start at the newsrooms. I entered a workforce 20 years ago, majority male, majority white. I followed in the footsteps of those that came before me, the Matata Tsedus, the Mondli Makanyas, the Moiponi Malifanis, the Karima Browns, the Ranjeni Munsamis, that had to be very aggressive in that workspace because a woman, a black woman, the blacker you are, the more female you are, the more you are undermined. It's the nature of nationalism, and nationalism is in our blood in this country because of what the apartheid government did to us, right? So they laid the ground for my generation to then come in, work harder than anyone else, and prove that we were the best. Because thankfully, in a newsroom, the best person to cover a story does the job. In terms of transformation broader in media and in other sectors, under the Thabo Mbeki government, and I'm not a fan of Thabo Mbeki. I criticized him at the time over HIV and AIDS and his handling of Jackie Selebi. But where he did really well is there was synergy between national government, head of SOEs, and in conversations with big business. There was synergy around transformation. Your SOE head knew that transformation was top of the agenda. When Thabo Mbeki left office, compliance with BEE is better than compliance with employment equity and affirmative action. EE and affirmative action compliance is sitting at below 50% in the private sector. And it's a simple thing, which I asked President Ramaphosa about in 2014. I said to him, simply send labour inspectors, ensure your big business submit reports, and the legislation allows for you to find companies who are not complying. I said that to him in an interview in 2004, and he promised there would be more labour inspectors. We're now sitting in 2023, and compliance with EE and compliance with AA is at its lowest. And it's been challenged by parties like the Democratic Alliance. So I don't know if the ANC supports transformation anymore because of the compliance levels. And the DA are currently in court challenging not just BEE, but also AA and EE. And if some judge somewhere decides that to say it's illegal, then our whole transformation legislation gets brought into question. We try to do the best we can wherever we are.
On there, you touched Mbeki's era, Ramaphosa's era.
Yeah.
What about the Zuma era?
It was all about self-interest.
So there was no.
It was transformation for the sake of self-interest.
Okay, so a few selected individuals.
Yeah, and the thing is, my career took a huge knock under the Mbeki era. I won't mention the media organization that I was in, but when COSATU was amongst the first captured. The ANC Youth League was disbanded as part of state capture. And those views were suppressed in mainstream newsrooms around the country. Thankfully, I was able to retreat and work at Power FM. And, I've always just put my head down, done the job, and it eventually passed. But it was difficult. I mean, people forget media were on the front lines. We were on the front lines fighting against state capture before the judiciary was. It was a difficult period, and I just hope we've learned lessons and history never repeats.
You touched earlier on the nationalism and also media being on the front line fighting state capture before it became state capture. But a bit of, credibility is questioned now when it's a thing where it feels like certain people get covered in a certain way, whether it be along factional lines, whether it be, even something as small as, I won't mention the news agency, but sometimes it's when a white person passes and a black person dies.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. Look at Israel-Palestine. Look at the example that you just gave. One person is considered human and the other person is not seen as human. And I think that is where we have a lot of nation building to do. consistency, and also consistency in application of the law. There's been a breakdown of law and order in South Africa. We saw that during the riots in 2021. If you look at the stats, I think it's only 20% of murders get solved in South Africa. Consistency in application of the law, consistency in application of the rules, and consistency in treatment of people, we've got a long way to go. But at the same time, we are 30 years old. We are 30 years into democracy. We're at that age.
You know, without laboring the point, there's former President Kgalema once said that the media don't believe what they write. How true is that?
So I think that it depends on the nature of power.
Okay.
Right?
Elaborate.
There are some, like journalists are not transcribers. We are not loud hailers, right? Where we work is important because the ethos of an organization is important. Who we work for is important because you should be on the same page. I thankfully have worked for bosses where if I disagreed, they respected why I disagreed. I've never been forced to say anything or write a story that I didn't want to write. But also that comes with experience. For example, let me give you an example that I learned. A statement came out from Parliament saying the comedian Trevor Noah is getting a multi-million rand contract from SA Tourism. It was a statement. There was nothing wrong with writing it, right? It was attributed to the portfolio committee head in Parliament. So I wrote it. I shouldn't have written it immediately. I should have made calls before I wrote it and done due diligence because I would have found out that that committee was misinformed. What happened is that a hotel company is in negotiations with Trevor Noah to do an advertising campaign in South Africa. There's no government money. There's no SA tourism money. So sometimes we do jump. Sometimes, like I learned for probably the 500th time in my career, don't jump too fast. Take a breath, hold on, do the due diligence, right? Sometimes bosses, whoever your boss is, gets a bee in their bonnet about something, and you've got to try your best to deliver the story, even though you don't really care about it. But I can't say we don't believe what we write because it comes out in our name. So we try our best to believe in what we write.
Now the landscape. We're going into an election here, which we've touched. What is the current landscape? All the political parties.
I think our politicians are way too comfortable across the board. I think South Africans are hatful of established political parties. We've heard it before. We've seen it before. Even big political rallies. What is the point of them in actual terms? I understood them when the ANC was banned. I don't understand the point of the DA or other than the airtime they get on TV. I don't understand the point.
What was the point then?
Well, you needed leadership. You needed guidance. You never heard from your leaders. It was an occasion for you to hear from your leaders, to understand what they were going through, to understand what the way forward is. I would like to see the TV ratings for the ANC's manifesto, the DA's manifesto, and to see if it's actually worth it anymore. Because parties spend a lot of money on those things. According to the polling, smaller political parties, your EFF, your Action SA, your Rise Mzansi, are going to do very well in this election, according to Ipsos's polling. And to my mind, that is consistent with my gut feeling that South Africans are comfortable with the established political parties. Because you go there and it's as though, because of patronage politics, which is what the apartheid system was based on, and it continued into democracy, you go there and it seems as though our politicians, be it in the Western Cape or at the Union Buildings, live in a world far removed from reality. And it's been since 2000 and like the global economic crisis, since then, South Africans have borne the burden of state capture. In 2019, I was saying, in 2016 and 2019, I was saying South Africans are being suffocated by cost of living. And the DA and the ANC didn't do as well as they expected in those elections. in some places, and nothing's changed. I think the question all politicians and political parties should be asking themselves is South Africa a better place under whatever government I live under?
I fully get that.
And I'm not just blaming the ANC, because the DA has been in charge of the city of Joburg since 2016.
Okay. No, I get that. No disputes. I mean, it's a real lived reality.
So what's expected? Let me tell you what's expected. Let me tell you, right? Okay. 2016, 11 p.m. at night at this place we call The Rock, right? The Rock is the IEC National Results Center, for those of you that don't know. It's cold. I went out to meet someone. I came back. I was driving back. I see Jacob Zuma's face plastered on all the ANC posters, which was the worst idea in the world. But no one in the Zuma administration wanted to hear that, because they thought he was very popular. I walk in, I sit down. I see Zweli Mkhize, who was a Zuma man at the time, later became a Ramaphosa person, walking in with a trench coat and a scarf and a black beanie, going to the election desk. The late ANC Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte was sitting at the elections center and like sitting like that. And he came to check what she had obviously told him about this devastating loss for the ANC in Joburg and Tshwane, or the projected loss at that stage. I think that's going to be what's expected next year. Absolute shock.
Okay. And it's going to be very interesting. And I hope that everyone is going to register and play their part, so that we can all have a democratic outcome that we want to see. Now, the point I was going to make, right, is it just feels like with every... Let's use the president as example. When former President Mbeki comes in, great guy, time fades, a bad guy. Zuma comes in, great guy, bad guy. Mbeki was better, likewise with CR. Do you not think that it could also just be something like that, just as a human approach, that we always think the grass is green on the other side, and we get there and it's like...
I'm scared. I'm scared more than I was during state capture, because I don't have an issue with the ANC being voted out of power, but I do not know what a post-ANC economy or government or world looks like. I'm conscious of that as a black professional.
Elaborate. Why?
Look at the city of Joburg. Look at the city of Tshwane.
Okay.
Cape Town, the DA has done well. But the Ipsos poll says the DA is going to drop in results. Action SA and the EFF will grow dramatically in this election. I don't know what that means for South Africans.
And the coalition.
Can the EFF be trusted? Action SA has some pretty radical economic transformation views. Pretty radical immigration views. So I don't know. I'm scared. I'm more scared than I was during state capture. So we need to think about our vote very carefully.
So, censorship.
White managers censor more than black managers, in my 20-year experience.
Okay.
Because the worldview of me and my white boss might not be the same. I have a rule where I disagree with you privately. I won't do something I'm not comfortable doing, and my boss is fine with that. But in my 20-year, but I'm in a different position now because I have a seat at the table. I have a voice at the table. But in my 20-year experience, almost 20-year experience as a journalist, it's not censorship. It's perspectives of the world. So if your manager supports the DA, or your editor supports the DA, or your editor supports Jacob Zuma, and you have a different view because you are critical of Jacob Zuma or critical of the DA, that's where you see a serious form of censorship, especially during state capture, creep in. And it's something that... The problem is that in South Africa and in some of the global challenges we have around the world is we don't talk to each other anymore. We talk at each other.
Okay.
And manage the challenge of censorship by talking to and not at a situation when I'm talking to another person, my colleague or my boss.
Are you saying you pro censorship, anti censorship?
No, I'm anti-censorship.
So
Anti-censorship. But at the same time, a junior reporter, as young people often do, think they know everything. So that there has to be an engagement where you listen to each other, convince each other, and then the best story or the best angle or the best meaning in the context in the story gets included.
But there is that narrative out there that there's too much freedom of expression and everyone can report what they like, and therefore on a global scale, SA is seen to have problems that all other countries have, but they just don't say it.
Yeah, I think we do need... I mean, we're a country where we don't have law and order. If people get murdered, then, like, what's the consequence for writing a fake news? We need to have law and order. We need to implement EE and AA. We need to take ourselves and our job seriously.
How would we do it? If you were...
So we have the press ombudsman and the BCCSA. You can also go to court and sue for defamation. But social media has also... While it's democratized the space, it also means you can say anything or everything about anyone or anyone and get away with it. I mean, we had an entire insurrection in South Africa. We had political riots that threatened to cripple the economy, killed over 300 people, raised thousands of businesses across the country. And so there was no high-profile mastermind. It was just a spontaneous thing, really?
When you say that, you're reminding me now, and we didn't touch on it earlier with all the political parties. Our former president, Jacob Zuma, and his movement. What do you make of that?
Oh, Jacob Zuma. He has dominated so much of my life, so much of the last 20 years. Look, I think anyone who considers Zuma stupid or Julius Malema stupid is stupid themselves. I think that Zuma's an incredibly wily politician who wants to remain active in decampaigning the ANC or trying to decampaign the ANC by saying he's going to vote for another political party.
But remain a member.
I think it's Umkhonto weSizwe if you support Zuma and want to vote for that party. I think what he's looking for is that which he does not control, he destroys. Consistent with state capture. I think he was the architect. Had a lot of help, but was the architect. And I think he wants 1% so that when the ANC is in coalition talks, he can make his demands at the table very clear. And that's all he needs, 1%.
What do you think he would demand? And how's 1% significant? I mean,
well, if the ANC gets 40%, then it needs all the votes it can get, all the support it can get. So that 1% could determine that he demand anything. Absolutely anything at the table.
And
it's going to be interesting to see what it is. If I were President Ramaphosa, I'd be very worried.
Okay. Yeah. We'll see. I guess we're going to have to wait.
Well, no, wait. I'm sorry. The ANC says that they're getting above 50%, so maybe they don't have to be worried.
I'm like, that's also going to be very interesting to see. But I guess, once again, you guys are going to have to come out, register, vote, so that we can see what we want to see, whatever it is. The
youth should vote. I would be interested to see if the youth vote for the EFF. I would be very interested to see that.
Okay. So now, youth in particular, how do we get them on board?
That's a question that all political parties have answered for a long time. If the youth register to vote, I think the category between 18 to 35 will make up about 30 to 50% of the total electorate. So the youth can literally decide what the future of South Africa is. But all political parties have, I would say, largely failed in registering the youth. And all political parties have tried for some years now, because the youth do not feel like they have a political home in the ANC or the DA, the more established parties. So we will see in this election whether they navigate to the newly formed or the new parties.
As a journalist, seasoned journalist, what is it you want us to know that we don't know?
That consumer spending is down. Record lows in 20 years. GDP is going to drop. companies are likely to retrench, government will have less in its fiscus. And that lays the ground for the winds of change. And that is what I would like us all to consider. Regardless of who we vote for, it doesn't matter. It's your constitutional right to apply our minds very carefully to who we vote for.
Okay. All right. Guys, you've heard it. Thank you for making time and coming out. We are going to come back again around election season to get more of that political commentary.
My pleasure.
Guys, tune in again. Oh, link, what? Likes, share, subscribe. Yeah, those things. See you again next week.
I will.